She climbed the stairs, past an octagon window in the narrow storage room on the second floor. The white ceramic tub, raised on little brass legs, was centered in a bathroom separating the stairs and the bedroom and directly over the back of the reading room. The tub bubbled with a hovering steam as the cascading water produced a deafening cacophony across the hall. Mattie turned the paddle wheel handles, embedded with a circular white ivory and black H and C. The warm vapor soothed her skin and she paused. She walked to the right above the kitchen into an oversized bedroom with a single rose-flowered hurricane lamp next to a four-poster cherrywood bed. The room was swept by pale yellow wallpaper with a creeping English ivy woven within a pattern of baby's breath. 4 elongated, thin-beveled trim windows were adorned with beige lace curtains, furrowing in the evening breeze. From the antique cherry highboy, she slid open the bottom drawer and gently removed her flannel nightgown, but she doubted she would need it. The wide floorboards creaked as she returned to the bath and stepped onto the cold white tile. She pulled her jersey over her shoulders and lifted her feet into the soothing waters, inundated with a sweet jasmine body lotion she had sprinkled on the dry basin. Her sensitive skin slid against the ceramic and into the massaging water. She closed her eyes and inhaled the fragrance and raised her arms along the smooth tub rim. The black telephone on the tiny downstairs table rang and startled her in the warm water. She sat up quickly, clutched her dry terry-face cloth, and waited for the next ring. A second escalating ring soon rattled the house. Mattie debated whether to leave the security of the heated water. In her mind, as the phone rang a third time, she stood next to the rotary dial phone in the moonlight room downstairs. The hiss and muffled chiming of the earlier call never left her, and she prayed the ringing would cease. She covered her ears and pushed hard enough to block the sound, but the reverberating bell's energy resonated within her bones. She released her hands and stood. Enough! Water drained off her body into the sudsy mass, and the house was again silent. It was as if the phone had never rung. The cooler air through the open tub window produced a cavalcade of goosebumps over her water-slick skin, but she hesitated, not knowing if she should head downstairs and disconnect the line. One has to ask, at the beginning of Exchange House, how a sensitive, caring, and nice person like Mattie Summers is married to this neglectful husband who's away most of the time, and when he is at home, seems to just use her for his own desires. Mattie's alone in her studio. She reads an ad in a magazine, New England Life, about an opportunity for Exchange House. Exchange House, an 1850s house with a farmer's porch, restored to the simplicity of another era, located in rural Rexford, Maine, on 25 acres of spreading woodland, a rock cliff ocean view, and hiking trails. Owners will arrange house exchange for indefinite periods of time. Details to follow. She lives in Arizona with her husband, John Summers. Sometimes she wishes John were gone out of her life. She looks at pictures of New England, specifically Maine. Maine is light years from Phoenix. She calls her friend Deborah, who works at the hairdressing salon. Deborah is not very happy with John and thinks that Mattie should leave him. She mentions to Mattie, just plan a trip to New England and go. Mattie thinks back about John's calling card, yellow roses. John arrives back in Arizona exactly when he said he would. She had just painted a magnificent sunset on canvas. John mentions he knows corporate people who have connections to artwork, but that's not what Mattie's looking for. She's looking for him to accept her work, her creation. John mentions to her after they make love, "You were great, Matt." And then he turns on a preseason football game. She thumbs through the pages of New England Life, looking at color layouts of a hawk circling high above a lake in New England. At that time, John's boss Harlan calls, and then he's on his laptop as she sits in bed alone. She puts on a film noir on the television set. John says that he has a 52% gain in one account. She just shakes her head as she thumbs through the shots of beautiful glossy pictures of New England. He's mad when she tries to end the conference call and finally pulls the plug on the computer. He says, "What the hell do you think you're doing?" She fears his violent temper. John goes over to the liquor cabinet after apologizing to his boss. He gulps down the liquor. Then he lunges at her and squeezes her arm. She had crossed the line with John and she knew it. Maybe she wanted to. On her arm is a red band of pressure points. John then leaves abruptly in his sports car, but as if his hand were still encircled around her arm, she stares at the red band of pressure points. She moves outside and dives into the pool. Mattie finally makes the trip to New England. She's on State Highway 102 to Rexford, Maine, listening to the local radio shows. For 4 weeks, she has been separated from John Summers. The exchange house is in Rexford, the down-home town. At 601 Main Street, she meets Daniel McCabe, the house's caretaker. She relishes the slower life away from the freeways and the malls. She moves up a musty hallway and knocks on the wood. McCabe is younger and vital and more muscular than she had pictured the caretaker for the exchange house. He tells her that she's in Maine at peak foliage, and the Fairbanks house goes way back in history. She's about to get a ticket for her rental car, but McCabe yells out the window at the meter maid and fixes the ticket. They go down to the down-home diner because her car is not working well. McCabe says he can get the car fixed at Belson's garage. He'll bring her over to the property later, maybe around 11. The locals inside the diner look her over. A toothless man with a ponytail takes over the booth before she can sit down. He looks at her and says, "It's mine." He lights a cigarette and begins turning newspaper pages. At the counter is a local guy named Preble. The guy with the ponytail stares over the newspapers. His name is Raymond Snowden. Preb tells her that Captain Fairbanks himself is buried in the graveyard in the woods behind the house. But he tells her to call him Preb. He says, "Call me or Abby if you need anything while you're here in Rexford." Mattie steps into the cooler air. She has the feeling that somebody is watching her. McCabe's polished black pickup pulls up to the diner. He opens the side door for Mattie. Mattie remembers how John Summers never opened the door for her once. He has her suitcases and sets them into the truck bed. Raymond Snowden savors a cigarette back at the garage. Little Raymond, big man. He likes to hang out at the Surfside. And then he goes home and his mother puts him to bed, according to McCabe. He's a little kid who never grew up. McCabe's truck rumbles over the bridge. His politeness seemed too good to be true. He has a military background. He tells her that the Fairbanks house is safe. Mattie has the feeling that McCabe knows everything about her as they zoom down the forested highway. She tells him her art supplies are being shipped to the Fairbanks house. The Fairbanks house is on an igneous protrusion over the ocean. There are no other houses around there. McCabe wants to buy her dinner at Brisky Whiskey's. McCabe seems miffed when she says no. They move past the side lawn and a volleyball net. The house ahead has almond clapboards, dormers, and lacy curtains within the windows. The farmer's porch has fluted posts. In the distance, the blue ocean forms a line across the horizon. McCabe becomes snappy when he's rejected. His eyes tighten and he leaves abruptly, saying, "I'll see ya." Mattie looks out over the yellow-green birches and the radiant-hued maples. She smells fresh paint somewhere along the outside of the Fairbanks house. The stone foundation gives away the true age of the house. She is astounded by the height of the cliff above the sloshing surf below. A sandy shore stretches out from the cliffs beyond the marshes to the left and breaking waves toward an incinerator far away down the beach. Now she feels completely alone. There is no evening TV, no video, only the moonlight stillness. She's preoccupied with every creak and crack inside the house. She begins a charcoal sketch of the beach, leaving out the incinerator. The black rotary foam begins to ring, an old-fashioned ring echoing throughout the house. On the other end, there's hiss and crackle as a car rolls by, and in the background, a melodic chiming fills the earpiece. She calls her friend Deborah. Deborah tells her that John had called the hair salon to say that he was sorry for what he did to Mattie, but Mattie doesn't want anything to do with John. She's drawing McCabe on sketch paper. Outside, the ocean waves are breaking, and marsh is dreamy in the moonlight. Again, as all the lights are out in the house with the exception of the upstairs rooms, the black telephone rings. She's in the tub and is afraid of the phone. Her heart thumps as she dries off. There's more telephone rings. Did John obtain the house number? Maybe McCabe was unstable. Raymond was unstable. She lifts the phone, there's nobody there, and she puts the phone back in place. And what really shocks Mattie is a yellow rose, John's calling card, in the dresser. She has thoughts of calling John as she sinks in the darkness into the goose-feathered pillow. The phone rings again in the middle of the night and then stops. There's a faint scraping outside. She goes downstairs and grabs a paring knife out of the downstairs kitchen drawer. She goes outside. It's the wind pushing a branch against the clapboards. She bends it back so she won't hear it again upstairs. She dials John's voicemail exchange. She speaks loudly and warns him to stay away from her or she'll call an attorney. She says, "You're out of my life. Get that through your head." In the morning, sunshine produces a pale yellow glow in the shades of the bedroom. There's a sliver of light that moves along the dresser. She slept 8 hours. Brightening sunlight moves up the stairs and the oil burner is kicked in. She looks at the brass clamps loose around the deadbolt and wonders what's happening. The phone rings again. It's that old-fashioned ring. McCabe is on the other end, apologizing for his behavior yesterday. She tells him about the yellow rose, and he immediately hurries over from town. He says that the cleaning lady had come out Tuesday. He talked with Jacobson, the cop, and let him know that somebody may have been in the house. She likes McCabe. She feels secure with him. McCabe checks the entire house. She feels secure with McCabe. The window in the basement is cracked open. He talks about the chiming on the phone and said the only chiming in the town is from the Congregational Church just outside of town, on the road in from the highway. She tells McCabe that McCabe has a mental file on her. McCabe says she analyzes too much. Must come with being an artist. McCabe spots the sketch of himself. She goes with him to the truck and agrees to go to Brisky Whiskey's later. Inside Belson's garage, McCabe is inside talking with Belson, but the rental car has not been fixed. She feels protected being seen with McCabe in the diner. She tells Preb about the numerous phone calls out to the exchange house. Preb said it could be fluke calls, but he'd try and track it down. McCabe has a huge breakfast as Mattie just nibbles on a Danish. She can't believe that he eats this breakfast every morning. McCabe tells her he's going to make her feel so secure that she'll sleep with the windows open. Preb says that Abby, his wife, will show Mattie the graveyard in the woods beyond the Fairbanks house. McCabe brings Mattie to Secondhand Annie's and gets country outfits for their date tonight at Brisky Whiskey's. McCabe is always grinding his teeth, but he has a dynamic persona. At that same time, Raymond Snowden walks out of the liquor store. McCabe calls him an obnoxious little son of a bitch. Raymond is a nobody. He's non-violent, just belligerent. He's a damn stooge is what he is. The canvas and easel arrive later and put in McCabe's truck bed. The lawn is brilliant green and the upper gables shine in the sunshine as they drive back to the Fairbanks house. 2 lawnmower blades that were in the window of the garage are gone. Stanley Simmons, the maintenance guy, must have taken them down. Mattie starts the coffee maker. The almond coffee smell inundates the house. The rose must have been from Simmons's wife, who cleans the houses for McCabe. But Mattie is not convinced. She thinks John must have called them. Men never forget getting dumped, says Mattie. McCabe nods his head and said no, they don't. The ringing phone again scares Mattie. An automobile passes in the background, but nobody answers. She places mango beads in her bath. She thinks back to how she met John at an art show in Phoenix, how he asked her to dinner, how she had hoped to have her own studio. He called her back right away and said he'd return to Phoenix next week. He brought a dozen yellow roses. She fell in love. John was so busy at work, even before the wedding. His devotion was to Harlan Hines and his company. She puts on her country outfit and frosts her lips. McCabe would arrive soon. When his truck pulls up in the drive, she finds another rose in her dresser. She tells McCabe that she thinks Raymond is the one calling from the area of the Congregational Church. McCabe drives by the diner in Belson's. Brisky Whiskies is off of Main Street. After a few beers, she settles her nerves. She learns some of the dance steps and dances several slow dances with McCabe. She prays that Mrs. Simmons has been the one who put the roses in the room. As McCabe steps outside, Raymond Snowden's cigarette smoke filters up into her face. He's missing a tooth and has a bruised face. Suddenly he's gone, but then he returns as a cold presence on her shoulder. He steps in front of her. He says, "I don't like being treated like dirt." Then he vanishes into the night. She goes outside and sees Jake the cop with McCabe and going over something on his clipboard. McCabe sits down at a table away from the bar. He talks to Mattie about his father, how his father had got the Purple Heart in action. He became one of the sharpest attorneys in Portland. She looks out over the yellow harvest moon shimmering over the bay. The surf bursts against the rocks, and McCabe kisses her. He tells her how they played guns in the Fairbanks house when he was a kid. The house still smells of mango from her bath. He says the phone call must be coming from outside the town near the church. He kisses her longer this time. He wants to stay for the night to protect her and says he'll sleep on the reading room sofa downstairs. Mattie is in her flannel nightgown. McCabe is talking and joking with her from below. She hears the onward ticking of the alarm clock. She's convinced that John had been making those calls now from the phone. Or maybe it was Raymond Snowden. In the morning, there's a knock on the stairway door. It's McCabe. He has coffee and breakfast on a small tray as he brings breakfast in bed to Mattie. She goes on a hike with McCabe after breakfast. McCabe is breathing heavily, probably because of his cigarette smoking. He talks about the beach below where he first kissed a girl. She asked him where is she now, and he said he didn't know. She tells McCabe she'll make a dinner for him this evening. Later on, midday, she does hike with Abby Preble up to the graveyard. They look at Captain Fairbanks' tombstone with a verse from Rudyard Kipling's Harp Song of the Dane Woman. Later, Mattie asks how somebody could get up to the house through this path or through the roadway. Abby mentions there's something called the Padford Connector. Somebody could come up and walk right up to the house from the main road. In the cemetery, she thinks about Raymond Snowden as she looks at discarded whiskey bottles on the ground. The graveyard reflects Rexford's past. There are some graves that are 200 years old, and she begins tracing the engravings on the stones. She even traces Captain Fairbanks' stone and gets the verse on paper. As they eat lunch on a blanket in the graveyard, Abby talks about the early life in town. Then she brings up things about Dan McCabe that stun Mattie. He left the Marines with a dishonorable discharge. He was a prosecutor, and a man was harassing him. McCabe killed him with his bare hands. They said it was manslaughter because the man had a knife. He's also been married 2 times and had a gamut of women. His wife died a few years ago, and she's buried near the Congregational Church outside of town. The afternoon light on the breakers is captured on Mattie's canvas on the easel. Maybe McCabe inadvertently killed the man, or maybe not. Why didn't he mention his 2 wives? The hiss and chiming inside the old phone keeps replaying in her head. She hears a loud bang back near the house. It's the maintenance guy, Mr. Simmons, who's in the garage. She talks to Simmons about the mower blades and finds that he never even touched the mower blades, and the McCabe made up the entire story. It's at that time in the grass that she finds John's shiny tie tack with the initials JS. Mattie quickly returns to the house and grabs a paring knife. She searches the basement and checks the window locks. From the kitchen, the cellar door slams shut. She marches upstairs. The rooms seem unusually dark. Then she secures the basement deadbolt. Billowing thunderclouds are approaching within the sun's glow. Another yellow rose is on the pillowcase. Wind and thunder move across the white-capped water below. She discovers the wires are gone from the telephone junction box. Did McCabe place those phone calls from his wife's grave at the church? She holds a knife in her shaky hand as lightning bolts zigzag into the ocean. She has the chicken roasting in the oven and boiling potatoes and beans on the stove. She has set out linen napkins and cuts her hand on the knife. Then the power goes out. The thunder seems louder now, and the cold, wet, salty air pounds against the outside porch. Her wound splits open. The house is illuminated alternatively by a bizarre lighting display from the thunderstorm. An outside blast of thunder shakes the house as McCabe arrives and asks Mattie if she's all right. She wants to know why he lied about the mower blades. Her hair is soaked now from being outside. She finds the blades near a stack of books inside the house. McCabe wants the blades, but she refuses to give them to him. Somebody's cut the wires to the power, she tells McCabe, but he says the outside line is down. She blames him for the phone calls. John Summers had always worn suspenders. At this time, she says, "You're in this with my suspender husband." McCabe brings up the fact that he spotted a man drinking Boilermakers and working on his laptop in a bar that he owns outside of town. But he tells her she's making snap judgments about him. She wants to leave Maine right now. McCabe goes out to his truck, but the truck won't start. She holds out the knife as McCabe stands by the fender in the rain and says, "Mattie, you've got me all wrong." She starts back to the house. The house is warmed by the chicken vapors from the oven. Country music from McCabe's portable radio begins to play. There's a yellow rose on the table. Through the candle and flashlight, he convinces her to serve dinner, but she won't eat. The thunder continues outside. He checks the truck again and then tells Mattie that she's really starting to piss him off. His conscience is clear about beating a man in court. He just said that he's out here because he liked Mattie. There's a break in the storm, but McCabe says he's not going to try and fix the electrical system during a storm. Mattie realizes she's put herself into an identical situation with her husband as her mother did with her military father. McCabe tells her that John must be long gone by now. She wants to hike back to the highway. The phone rings again, and now there's a tapping sound and a skipping patter in the background. She can't find the knife. There's a tightening wetness on her neck upstairs, and a knife blade slides along her neck. Arms are also around her neck. She careens over the bed onto the floor and into the hall. Somebody is trying to kill her. As she hurries downstairs, her painting of the bay has been slashed. She backtracks along the shed outside, moving down the shallow-cut, dimly lit fog trail to the graveyard. She hurries deeper into the woods as somebody shuffles behind her in the leaves. Several times she falls with water dripping from the trees. Then a rifle crack breaks the chilled silence. She's shielded by the gravestones. More fog creeps up the hill. There's an indefinite shadow in the fog. She crawls along the wet grass. She leaps into the old foundation and constricts her body into a ball to hide from her attacker. There's a steady drizzle now. The killer jumps into the hole and crushes aluminum cans with his feet as he searches for her. 4 orange flashes go off. She grabs a board. There's more thunder. She lobs stones at the rifle blast and hits the intruder with the board. Quickly, she scampers up the side of the foundation and back onto the slippery trail. She emerges from the woods near the garage. All the while, she keeps thinking of the dial tone on the old phone. McCabe's truck is still there. Somebody fires at her once she's in the house and the front reading room windows fall apart. More shots ring out and the stairs' newel post is splintered and shattered. Loud pops echo throughout the house as she runs upstairs to the tub room. She leaps onto the small ledge outside the window and onto the lawn. More shots are fired as she limps toward the cliff. Once along the cliff, McCabe's truck starts and headlights shine down across the rocks. She slips as her sneaker catches one of the slippery rocks and may have broken her ankle. The wind is knocked out of her. A shadow is pacing along the upper ledge through the truck lights. Just 2 feet of ledge separate her from a 50-foot drop down the rocky trail. Gravel trickles down the ledge from above as the fog moves by the full moon. She reaches the sand in the moonlight and leaps down as her ankle feels like it's bursting apart. She hears McCabe's voice as she's in the sand below. The moonlight traces the shadow in the sand. McCabe says he smashed my head. The escarpment trail above is in the moonlight as the surf moves against the rocks. There's more rifle cracks. As the volley starts, she climbs toward the marsh in the distance. She drags her foot along the sand toward the marsh. She stands in the cold water, pushing back the reeds. There's a lull and then more rifle fire. She tries to steer an indefinite course toward the lighthouse beacon in the distance. She shivers continuously from the wind-chilled air. She moves through the estuary waters slowly. The cliff looms behind the reeds as a shadowy figure emerges. The moonlight glistens off the rifle barrel. Then she hears McCabe through the reeds. The gun flashes. Bullets tear up the marsh. She moves steadily through the water onto the beach. She can see red and blue cruiser lights down the distant highway. The cruiser light skims the reed tops. She limps through the mushy grass. Then there's several quick pops. Someone shouts out orders. There are other cops around the incinerator now. She hears fists against human flesh. More shots ring out. McCabe's voice booms into the night. The officers arrive on shore. McCabe holds her shoulders. There's a bloody gash above his eye. He says that he smashed my head. He fell unconscious back near his truck. Jacobson arrives as Raymond Snowden lay motionless on the berm. He was in a poker game with John. He came back to the Fairbanks house with John, but John had run up a $20,000 poker tab. He killed John and burnt his body in the incinerator. McCabe supports Mattie as they move along. Mattie says, "You and I came real close to dying out there, McCabe." She has an odd, sober smile. She said, "I think we both have injuries that need attention."